Dear Lord, for the woman whose heart was shattered by the one she trusted most, give her strength. For the mother who chose faith over bitterness, bless her tenfold. For the man who realizes, too late what he gave up, grant him humility. And for every soul walking through betrayal into purpose, let truth be their guide, and love be their reward. Amen. Halima King stood by the nursery door with her hand resting softly on her round belly, her other hand gripping the side of the crib they'd built together. Frank wasn't home, again. But this time, she felt something different in the air, something final. The ultrasound photo was still on the fridge, held by a best couple ever magnet she placed there with pride just 2 weeks ago. Now it felt like a cruel joke. Her phone vibrated. Frank, we need to talk when I get back. That's all it said. No heart emoji. No love you. Just 5 words that sliced deeper than any argument they'd ever had. 2 hours later, he came through the door, polished in his tailored suit, the scent of his expensive cologne lingering. But his eyes didn't meet hers. Halima's heart tightened. Frank, what's going on? He didn't answer right away. He placed his keys on the marble counter, sighed, then finally said, My mother doesn't think the baby is mine. Silence fell like a curtain. Halima blinked. Once, twice. Her throat tightened, but no words came out, only disbelief. You believe that? She whispered. I don't know what to believe right now, he replied, his voice low, almost ashamed. She said some things, brought up inconsistencies. I can't ignore them. Inconsistencies? Halima's voice cracked. I'm 5 months pregnant with our child, Frank. We planned this. We talked about baby names. You kissed this bump every morning like it was your future. He looked down. She had a paternity test run, based on a hair you left on a scarf in the car. Halima took a step back, her body trembling. You let your mother test my DNA behind my back? He didn't answer. That was the answer. And then, words she never imagined would come from the man who once swore to love her forever. I think you should go stay with your family for now. Let me ask you something real. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, so honestly, only to be doubted because someone else couldn't stand how brightly you were loved? Have you ever watched a man's love disappear, not because of something you did, but because of something someone else said? Halima didn't just lose Frank that night. She lost the man who once called her his world, all because of whispers dressed up as concern, all because his mother couldn't stand the idea of her son building a life with a woman who didn't fit the family mold. Frank never raised his voice. He didn't slam the door. But he did worse. He let silence replace certainty. And that kind of silence, it shouts. The night Halima left Frank's home, she didn't take much, just a small suitcase, her laptop, and the last pieces of her dignity. Her hands shook as she closed the door behind her, but she refused to break in front of him. She walked out of the mansion carrying a child he already doubted, and a pain she didn't deserve. Her best friend, Ebony, opened the apartment door before Halima could even knock. One look at her swollen eyes and Ebony whispered, He really let you go while you're carrying his child? Halima nodded, her voice gone, her breath shallow. Ebony pulled her inside and said softly, Then let this be your beginning, not your ending. The weeks that followed were not glamorous. Her ankles were swollen, her back ached, and her heart still felt bruised. But every morning, she placed a hand on her stomach and promised her unborn child, You will never feel unwanted, not a day in your life. And from that promise, her purpose was born. Halima started sketching ideas on scraps of paper at Ebony's kitchen table. She researched during the late nights when pregnancy insomnia wouldn't let her sleep. She watched online seminars, drafted business plans, and reached out to small Atlanta entrepreneurs who needed help growing their brand. The idea wasn't big. It wasn't flashy. It was simply compassionate. A small marketing startup for regular people with real dreams. The kind of dreams her own childhood community lived on. But from a friend's borrowed couch, Halima built something that would change her entire life. Meanwhile, Frank signed the divorce papers the same week she filed her business registration. He thought his silence would crush her. He thought she would come crawling back. He thought she needed space to realize her mistake. But the one who needed space was him, because Halima wasn't falling apart. She was rising. Here's the part most people never expect. While Halima rebuilt her life, she carried a truth far more powerful than heartbreak. A truth tied to her identity. A truth tied to the father she barely remembered. A truth tied to a legacy her mother never revealed, because she wanted Halima to grow up grounded, not privileged. Halima wasn't just a woman starting a small business. She was the granddaughter of a woman Atlanta whispered about with admiration, a woman whose quiet fortune had built community centers, funded scholarships, and owned hospitality chains across the Southeast. Halima had no clue a massive inheritance waited for her, no idea her last name held weight, no idea she was the heir to a dynasty she'd never met. While she was crying into Ebony's pillow, rebuilding her life and protecting her baby. A door of destiny was quietly opening on her behalf, and when that truth finally reached Frank, he didn't walk, he didn't call, he didn't text, he begged, on his knees. Because by the time he realized the truth, Halima had already become everything he thought she couldn't be without him. Her success wasn't because of him. Her strength wasn't because of him. Her glow wasn't because of him. She did it without him, and that's the kind of truth that brings a proud CEO to his knees. Halima Kings had always been the woman who believed in real love, messy, bold, and beautifully grounded. So when Frank Owens, the white CEO with the clean-cut charm and an MBA from the University of Chicago, got down on one knee under the magnolia trees in Piedmont Park and proposed with a modest gold ring and trembling fingers, she didn't hesitate. She said yes. Their love story had bloomed over shared laughter, long walks through Midtown, and those cozy late-night debates over collard greens versus quinoa salads. He came from money, yes, but with Halima, he found a depth he didn't know he was missing. Halima loved with everything she had. Their apartment in Buckhead was a blend of cultures. Black art lined the living room walls, and a jazz playlist always hummed softly in the background. She wore her natural curls tied up in silk scarves, and Frank never failed to compliment her glow, even when she didn't feel like glowing. When Halima found out she was pregnant, she cried, first in disbelief, then in joy. Frank lifted her off the floor and spun her around in the kitchen, laughing, "We're going to be parents. We're really doing this." He started reading parenting blogs and made a Pinterest board labeled, "Our Little Owens." Halima thought she'd hit life's sweetest spot, career in place, love of her life beside her, and a baby on the way. Every Thursday, she still went to choir rehearsal at church. Every Sunday, they'd attend a soul food brunch with her mom and sisters. Frank, despite looking like a fish out of water at first, would be the one making everyone laugh by the second round of cornbread. Their worlds weren't just blending, they were blooming, but sometimes even the sweetest things carry a silent expiration date. Selena Owens was a woman who could smile at you while picking apart your entire life. She'd spent decades climbing Atlanta's elite circles and didn't plan on letting her son marry into anything that didn't fit the image. When she first met Halima, she served tea in porcelain cups and complimented Halima's shoes. But before the second sip, she asked, "So Halima, are your parents still together?" The question was framed sweetly, as if out of polite curiosity. But Halima felt the edge in it. Halima had grown up in a black working-class family where strength came from women holding it all together. Her father was long gone, and her mother had worked 2 jobs to raise 4 daughters with dignity. That wasn't something Halima was ashamed of. It was her crown. But to Selena, it was a red flag. Over the next few months, Selena became a consistent presence. She'd call Frank late at night with concerns about Halima's past, subtly questioning her intentions. "She's lovely, of course," Selena would say, "but are you certain she's not seeing you as a financial stepping stone?" Frank would bristle at first. "Mom, Halima's a marketing director. She has her own career." Selena would chuckle and drop the phone call with, "Just be careful, darling. Not everyone is raised with our values." Her words crawled into Frank's mind like a leak under a floorboard, small, barely noticeable, but enough to rot the foundation over time. Halima felt the shift. First, it was Frank double-checking things she said. Then he started asking, "Do you really want to go to your mom's this Sunday? Or are you sure you want to raise our baby in a public school district?" When Halima smiled and said, "We both agreed on community-based values," he only nodded, but his eyes were elsewhere. The cracks were forming, quietly, strategically, as if someone was twisting the perfect frame Halima had helped build. It happened on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. Halima was working from home, sipping ginger tea and sketching out a client campaign when Frank walked in early from work, his expression unreadable. He held something in his hand, a printed lab report. "Selena had your DNA tested," he said flatly, like he was trying to detach himself from the absurdity of the words. Halima blinked. "What?" "She found a hair from your scarf in the car. She had it tested. Against mine. It says the baby isn't biologically mine." Silence fell between them like an earthquake. Halima slowly stood up, heart pounding. "You're telling me your mother stole my hair and did a paternity test behind my back, and you're bringing it to me like it's valid?" Frank looked torn. "I didn't ask her to do it, but you believe it," she said bitterly, voice cracking. He didn't respond. His silence said enough. "That test is fake," she said sharply. "You know it's fake. I've never touched another man, Frank. Ever. This baby is yours. But your mother couldn't control me, so she decided to control you." Frank opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Halima, I just need time. I need to think. I don't know what's true, right now." She stepped back like he slapped her. "You don't know what's true? After everything?" The hurt in her voice was unbearable. Frank didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just sat down and rubbed his temples. And that moment told her everything. 2 days passed. No apology. No clarity. Frank barely spoke. He left early. Came home late. Halima stayed in the guest room, unsure if she was more furious or heartbroken. Then on Friday morning, Frank stood at the door as she made breakfast. He didn't sit. He didn't greet her. He simply said, "Maybe it's best if you go stay with your family for now." "Are you kicking me out?" she asked quietly. "It's not like that," he said, eyes avoiding hers. "I just think space will help us both." She stared at him, stunned. "I'm 5 months pregnant. We built a home together, and now you want me to leave because of your mother?" Frank finally looked at her. "I'm not saying it's forever. I'm saying right now I can't do this." She took a deep breath and nodded. No tears, no begging. She packed her things in silence. Clothes, prenatal vitamins, ultrasound photos, the copy of What to Expect they read together in bed. When she walked past him, suitcase in hand, he didn't move. He didn't try to stop her. She left the keys on the console table and closed the door behind her. No words, just absence. It was a week later. Halima had moved into her cousin's apartment on the south side of Atlanta. Her family had rallied around her with casseroles, love, and late-night prayers. Ebony came every evening with tea and updates from the world she no longer had the energy to engage with. But nothing hurt more than the interview. Frank had gone on a business podcast to talk about personal evolution. It was a platform he'd been booked on months earlier. She hadn't even remembered the date until she saw his face on her feed. She clicked it, heart pounding. "And I think sometimes in life," Frank said smoothly, "you make decisions that feel right at the moment, but later you realize they were emotional, not smart." The host asked gently, "You mean in business or personal life?" Frank laughed. "Both. Sometimes you choose people who don't fit the life you're building, and it takes something difficult to make you see clearly. I made that mistake once, but I've learned since then." Mistake. That word hit Halima like a hammer. Not past, not chapter. Mistake. She closed her laptop slowly. Her hands were trembling. Ebony walked in with takeout, smiling. "You won't believe who I saw on YouTube today." Halima didn't answer. Ebony paused and spotted the frozen expression on her friend's face and walked over. She saw the laptop screen still glowing with Frank's interview paused mid-smile. Ebony's smile vanished. "He didn't," she began. "He did," Halima whispered. "He called me a mistake." She looked down at her belly, gently cradling it with both hands. "No," she said to herself. "This baby isn't a mistake. I'm not a mistake." That night, Halima didn't cry. She wrote. And in that moment, Kings & Company was born, right there, on the back of a takeout napkin, with a pen she borrowed from Ebony's purse. He'd erased her like a stain on his reputation, but she would build a name that couldn't be ignored. The rain fell in slow, stubborn sheets as Halima stared out the cracked window of room 208. The neon sign outside the motel buzzed unevenly, half lit, half forgotten. She sat on the edge of a hard mattress, her suitcase on the floor beside her, the zipper still slightly open from earlier. Her back ached from the weight of pregnancy, but her chest ached from the weight of heartbreak. The motel room reeked of must and neglect. A rusted mini-fridge hummed noisily in the corner. The beige walls were stained with memories of lives that had passed through before her. A faded floral curtain drooped over the narrow window, barely shielding her from the storm. This wasn't the life she planned. This wasn't the nursery with pale yellow walls and hand-painted butterflies she and Frank once dreamt of. This wasn't the house filled with sunlight and baby laughter that used to play in her head like a song. This was survival. After leaving Frank's home, she tried to stay with her cousin, but 2 toddlers, 1 bathroom, and a tense landlord made it unlivable long-term. So she booked the cheapest place she could find, until she could figure something out, something stable, something safe, but nothing about this place felt safe. The door chain barely held, the water came out in sputters, the bed creaked every time she shifted her weight, and worse, her heart still carried the echo of a man who once swore he'd love her forever. Halima placed a hand on her swollen belly. "You don't know it yet," she whispered, "but you saved me." In the quiet that followed, the only reply was the steady thump of the leaking faucet. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe through it all. She'd lost the love of her life, her home, and her future, at least the version she thought she had. But she hadn't lost herself. Not entirely, not yet. Halima shuffled across the thin carpet, pausing to tighten her robe over her pajamas before unlocking the door. Ebony walked in, rain-soaked and carrying 2 paper bags of food. Her big hoop earrings swayed as she looked around the room, nose wrinkling. "Girl, this place looks like a scene from one of those crime shows." Halima tried to smile, but it didn't last. Ebony set the bags down on the flimsy table and pulled Halima into a tight hug. "You shouldn't be here by yourself. I should have made you come stay with me." You already offered, Halima murmured. I didn't want to crowd your space. My space got space when it comes to you, Ebony said firmly. She stepped back and studied Halima. You ain't been eating, huh? Halima shook her head. Well, tonight you eat. Ebony unpacked hot food, catfish, yams, and cornbread from a spot they used to frequent in college. She handed Halima a plate and gestured toward the bed. As they ate in silence, Ebony kept glancing at Halima's face. Finally, she said, It's okay to cry, you know. I already did, Halima replied. For days. I'm out of tears. Ebony's eyes softened. Frank doesn't deserve your tears, not after what he did, not after what he let his mother do. Halima stared down at her plate. It's not just that. I loved him, Eb. I thought he saw me, the real me. Ebony leaned forward. He saw the woman he thought he could mold. But the real you? She's still right here. Hurt, yeah, but alive. And strong. Halima looked up, her eyes glistening. I don't feel strong. You don't have to, Ebony said, reaching over and holding her hand. You just have to keep going. And I'll be right here, every step. In that moment, surrounded by peeling paint and buzzing lights, Halima felt the warmth of something real. Loyalty. And it reminded her of one truth. Love doesn't always come from where you expect it. Later that night, after Ebony left and the motel room returned to its usual silence, Halima sat cross-legged on the bed with a notebook on her lap. She flipped through old journal entries, letters from her mother tucked in the back, and a yellowing photograph of her as a child, sitting on her grandmother's lap, both of them smiling under a tall oak tree. Her family had always been proud, quietly proud. There were stories she'd overheard growing up, about her maternal grandmother being a successful entrepreneur, about a great aunt who donated to women's clinics, about her mother once turning down a major inheritance to protect her daughters from the pressure of wealth with conditions. Halima never asked questions. She liked living modestly. She liked earning everything with her own hands, but deep down, there had always been a feeling. A shadow of something bigger behind her surname, Kings. But Halima never leaned into it. She had made it her mission, to stand on her own, to build her future without any crutches or secrets. So she buried that legacy quietly. Now, though, she wondered, would it have made a difference if Frank had known who she really was? Would Selena have looked her in the eye with more respect if she knew Halima's grandmother had donated more money to Atlanta's community programs than the Owens Foundation ever had? She sighed. No, it shouldn't have to take money or pedigree for people to treat you with basic human decency. She looked down at her belly again. I'll tell you everything one day, she whispered. The good, the bad, and the part where we rise anyway. The next morning, Halima found herself in a crowded waiting room. She was trying to register for a state assistance program. Her pride hated every minute, but her baby came first. She filled out forms while shifting on the stiff plastic chair. Around her, mothers with crying infants, toddlers, and tired eyes filled every corner. Then she noticed something. One mom in the corner was struggling to find resources on her phone. Another was trying to schedule transportation for a pediatric appointment. A third was asking about childcare options, but the pamphlet she was handed was outdated and missing key info, and it hit her. What if all of this, resources, referrals, reliable reviews, and tools, were all in one place? One platform, one app, simple, real, created by someone who gets it. She scribbled ideas on the back of her appointment form, searchable community resources, listings, verified service providers, peer reviews, emergency fund application info, even emotional support groups and mental wellness tools. Something human, something helpful. A digital safe space for single mothers. Her pulse quickened, her mind raced. She thought about Ebony, about her own mother, about every woman in that room who was trying to be everything with almost nothing. This wasn't just a business idea, it was a mission, and for the first time since her world collapsed, Halima felt a reason to breathe deeper. She was done trying to prove herself to a man who didn't deserve her truth. Now, she'd build something that made other women feel seen, heard, and held. That evening, Halima sat in the motel room with the lamp flickering beside her. She stared at her phone, thumb hovering over Frank's name in her contacts. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want closure. She didn't even want an apology anymore. She just wanted peace. She deleted the contact. Then she opened a fresh notebook and wrote down one sentence at the top of the page. We don't chase clarity from those who lied. We create clarity by living well. She called Ebony. I need your help. I have an idea, she said. Ebony was quiet, then replied, Say less, I got you. Halima went off social media the next day. She stopped explaining herself to anyone. She wasn't interested in defending her story, her choices, or her past. She was going quiet, not out of fear, not to disappear, but to rebuild. Frank Owens sat behind his custom walnut desk in the 31st floor corner office overlooking downtown Atlanta. The skyline glowed with the confidence of business deals and success stories. Inside, the glass walls were pristine, The assistant on the other side of the door filtered every interruption, and the screens in front of him displayed projections, profits, and power. To everyone on the outside, Frank was winning. His tech firm had just secured Series C funding. Shareholders were satisfied. His name kept appearing in business journals under top CEOs to watch. His suits were sharper. His smile was practiced. His team respected him. His investors trusted him. But beneath it all, he hadn't slept in days. He'd wake up at 3:17 a.m. without knowing why, just a quiet, nagging ache in his chest. And every time he passed the unused guest room in his luxury condo, something cold would spread down his spine. He never deleted the photos. They were still buried in his phone. Shots of Halima at brunches, laughing with his friends. Halima holding up the ultrasound picture, her face glowing. Halima at the community center gala, smiling like she believed the whole world could be good again. Frank had told himself he'd made the right decision. That doubt needed clarity, that maybe Halima wasn't who he thought she was. But in board meetings and conferences, during elevator rides and solo dinners, her voice kept echoing in his head. You don't know what's true? He did. He always had. But admitting that meant facing the fact that he hadn't just lost a woman, he'd lost the right woman. And worse, he'd thrown her away over someone else's paranoia. But every time he looked in the mirror, he saw a man who didn't deserve her approval anymore. He was rising, but the altitude came with emptiness, and success felt a lot like punishment. Halima sat in the narrow second-floor space of a community co-working hub in South Atlanta. It wasn't fancy, but it was filled with energy. Ambitious young creators tapping away at keyboards, old-school entrepreneurs learning how to run Facebook ads, and startup dreamers living off caffeine and grit. Her desk was just a refurbished folding table, but on it sat something far more powerful than appearance: vision. Next to her notebook was a prototype wireframe of her app, a mobile resource hub for single mothers. A place where information wasn't buried under bureaucracy and support didn't come with shame. The name still hadn't come to her yet, but the mission was loud and clear. Ebony came by every morning with her own laptop and a container of honey lemon tea. I dreamed about the app last night, she said, pulling out her chair. You know it's good when it follows you into your sleep. Halima smiled. It's starting to feel real. They'd started reaching out to local moms, collecting stories and feedback. They sat in churches, clinics, and rec centers asking, what do you really need? The answers shaped the platform. Emergency funding info, reliable childcare directories, real-time wait lists, and therapist referrals. Funding was tight. Their laptops were old, but Halima's eyes burned with a hunger she hadn't felt since before Frank. She worked through her lunch, breaks, fed Hakeem with one hand while typing with the other, and learned to navigate the back-end coding platforms on her own late at night. What she lacked in money, she made up for in momentum. No investors, no press, just vision and sweat and conviction, and in the corners of her mind, she whispered to herself, We're going to be fine. It was Ebony's idea to post it, a quick, casual video showing Halima explaining the app in her own voice, nothing edited, nothing scripted. Just her sitting at her desk, holding Hakeem on her lap, talking about what the platform could do for other mothers like her. She uploaded it to her business Instagram page and TikTok under a soft caption. From a motel room to this moment, because mothers deserve better. The video didn't explode overnight, but by the third day, it caught fire. Mothers started tagging their friends. Local community pages reshared it. An Atlanta doula collective stitched it on TikTok and said, this right here, this is what we've been waiting for. Within a week, Halima's inbox was flooded. Women wanted beta access. Healthcare clinics wanted partnerships. A nonprofit tech accelerator reached out about a grant. Halima sat frozen, scrolling through the comments. I needed this 5 years ago. I'm crying. This is me. Sis, don't stop. We see you. She didn't cry at first. She just sat there, stunned. Then Hakeem toddled into the room and pressed his tiny hands against her cheeks, and that's when the tears came. She scooped him up and held him close. It wasn't validation she needed. It was impact. She hadn't just survived. She had created something that mattered. Have you seen this? Frank's assistant Mallory asked as she placed a tablet in front of him. On the screen was a clip from a trending video with the caption, Atlanta Mom's app changing the game for single mothers. Frank skimmed the article, his attention split between calendar alerts and incoming emails. Impressive, he muttered. What's the platform called? Not sure, Mallory replied. Still in beta. But people are loving it. They're calling her the voice of real moms. Frank tapped the video but paused halfway through, distracted by a phone call. Later, when the article reappeared in a business trend report, he noted the rising metrics, the surge in engagement, the grant approval, the growing following. But he never connected the voice. He never saw her face in the clip. It was blurred for privacy. The screen name just Edking's Initiative. Frank jotted a quick note to look into potential partnership opportunities, but moved on. Because that's the thing about blind spots. They hide the things you're most afraid to face, was the very woman he once called a mistake. Halima rarely talked about Frank. Not to Ebony, not to her mother, not even to herself. But grief doesn't always shout. It lingers in the quiet moments between victories, like when she heard an old R&B song playing at a gas station and remembered dancing barefoot in Frank's kitchen. Like when Hakeem started asking, "Who's my daddy?" and she had to paste a gentle smile on her face. Like when a client asked if she was married, and her answer came out softer than she intended. "No, it's just me." The pain didn't dominate her days, but it colored the edges. She kept moving, she kept building, but late at night, once the laptop closed and the baby was asleep, she'd sit alone at the window of her apartment, her new place, and stare out at the lights of Atlanta. And sometimes she'd whisper, "He didn't just lose me, he lost us." But she never let the pain stop her. The cracks were real, yes, but they weren't breaking her. They were reminders that even diamonds begin with pressure, and she wasn't done rising. The email arrived on a Thursday morning while Halima was preparing oatmeal for Hakeem. She wiped her hand on a towel and glanced at her phone. Subject, invitation to the Women Innovators of Atlanta Gala. Her stomach fluttered. She had heard of this event before, an enormous annual gathering honoring women breaking barriers in tech, business, health, engineering, and community innovation. Usually, the recipients were founders with national press, seasoned CEOs, or multi-million-dollar companies. She was still in beta stage. Her app wasn't even publicly launched yet. Halima clicked the email cautiously. "Your work was nominated by several community partners who believe your platform will impact thousands. We would be honored to have you attend as a featured emerging innovator." Her hands covered her mouth. Ebony burst into the room wearing her oversized hoodie and kicked off her shoes. "Girl, you okay? You look like you saw a miracle." Halima held out the phone. Look." Ebony read silently, then her eyes widened. "Shut up. Shut up. They want you? Featured innovator? This is big. This is huge." "But I'm not ready," Halima whispered. "I'm still building. I don't have funding. I don't even have a permanent office. But you have purpose," Ebony cut in. "And people have already noticed. Why do you think your video blew up? Why do you think the clinic called? Why do you think strangers keep DMing you?" Halima exhaled a shaky breath. "I don't have a dress." Ebony waved a hand dismissively. "Babes, I will become your stylist if I have to. Look, this is your moment, not for Frank, not for his mother, for you, for the women you're helping, for your son." Halima nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll go." The gala was held at the High Museum of Art in Midtown Atlanta, known for its sleek architecture and grand halls. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Flashing lights reflected off the glass panels as photographers snapped shots of women dressed in gowns that looked like they floated. Halima stepped out of Ebony's car in a deep emerald dress that hugged her waist and flowed at her hips. Her curls were styled in a soft, elegant updo. Her makeup was soft glam, highlight on her cheekbones, a warm nude lip, and a glow that wasn't makeup at all. It was confidence. It was healing. It was the strength of a woman who rebuilt herself piece by piece. Ebony nearly fell to her knees dramatically. "Who is this goddess? Oh, that's right, it's Halima Kings." Halima rolled her eyes, but she couldn't stop smiling. As she walked toward the entrance, heads turned, women whispered, sponsors took notice. A photographer approached. "May I?" Halima nodded. She wasn't used to flashes. She wasn't used to eyes on her, but tonight felt different. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with warm lights. Black women, white women, Latina women, Asian women, all powerful in their own fields, mingled around silk-covered tables and crystal glasses. People didn't just look at her, they admired her. Halima stood tall. Tonight, she wasn't the woman kicked out of a mansion. She wasn't the pregnant girl crying in a motel. She wasn't the woman whose partner doubted her loyalty. Tonight, she was the woman who built something meaningful from scratch. She belonged here, deeply. A few moments after Halima took her seat, the host announced a special table for corporate sponsors. That's when she saw Selena Owens, Frank's mother. Her hair was styled in its usual sleek bob. Her pearl earrings perfectly matched her cream suit. She was talking to a bank executive, laughing, poised, composed. Halima's breath caught. Ebony immediately saw the tension and left to get water, ready to step in at any moment. Selena turned. Her eyes locked with Halima's. The color drained from her face. She choked mid-sentence, covering her mouth with a trembling hand. The bank executive gently patted her back, asking if she was okay, but Selena didn't respond. Her eyes were stuck, glued, to Halima. Halima didn't flinch. Not this time. Selena's purse slipped from her shoulder and fell to the floor. She bent down slowly, still staring at Halima, as if she were seeing a ghost or a truth she hoped would disappear. Halima simply lifted her chin and looked away. Her mind whispered, "You tried to break me, but I built myself stronger." Selina fumbled with her napkin, wiping the corners of her mouth, unable to mask her shock. Everything she'd assumed, everything she'd believed, everything she'd told Frank, shattered. This was Halima at her fullest, whole, radiant, accomplished. Selina hadn't imagined this, and she wasn't ready for it. The lights dimmed slightly as the next category of honorees was introduced, emerging innovators in digital access. Halima's category. Frank entered the ballroom late, escorted by a client he'd been meeting for drinks nearby. He hated galas, but this partnership was too important to pass up. He scanned the room, bored, adjusting his cufflinks. "Frank," his client said, grabbing a flute of sparkling cider. "You know this event? It's a big deal in Atlanta." Frank nodded. "I've heard." He wasn't paying attention until his eyes landed on a woman in green, a woman with posture so elegant it demanded attention. A woman with curls pinned back in a style that revealed the beauty of her face. He stared. "She must be a politician," he muttered, unsure why she felt familiar. Then the announcer called her name. "Please welcome our featured emerging innovator, Ms. Halima Kings." Frank froze. "Halima? It couldn't be." He blinked twice, adjusting his view. But the woman on stage was unmistakably her. His chest tightened to the point of pain. How? How did she look like this? Confident, accomplished, untouched by his absence. While he was climbing corporate ladders, she had climbed out of the pain he had put her in, and elevated into someone unrecognizable. The applause thundered around him as Halima stepped to the podium. He was the only one who couldn't move. After Halima delivered her speech, graceful, clear, and deeply moving, the room buzzed with admiration. She spoke about access, about compassion, about motherhood, about building something that made a difference. She never mentioned Frank. She didn't need to. Later that night, as she and Ebony stepped out of the museum, Halima's phone lit up rapidly with notifications. "Eb, look at this," Halima said quietly. Her recent partner, a community health clinic, had posted an ad on Instagram promoting family services. They had asked for permission to use Hakeem's photo weeks ago, but Halima didn't know they planned to run it tonight. The photo featured Hakeem sitting in her lap, smiling at the camera, holding a small toy. The caption read, "Every mom deserves support. Every child deserves a village." The post exploded online instantly. Within minutes it hit thousands of likes. Within an hour it was trending locally. But the twist wasn't the post, it was the comments. Multiple tech pages tagged the photo with, "Is this the child in the viral startup video? This kid is adorable. That's the founder's son. Protect these two at all costs." Then one comment stopped Halima cold. It was from someone she didn't know, but deep down recognized. "That baby looks like Frank Owens." Ebony gasped softly. Oh no. Halima's heart sank, not because she was scared, but because fate had just cracked open a truth she wasn't ready for the world to see. Hakeem's face had gone viral. And now, Atlanta was starting to put the pieces together, including Frank. 3 days after the gala, Halima sat at her small desk in the co-working hub, sipping warm tea while Hakeem played with building blocks beside her. Notifications continued to flash across her phone, messages, collaboration requests, praise from strangers who said her story brought them hope. Then an email arrived with a subject line that made her heart pause. "Feature request Atlanta Rising Innovators, Halima Kings." She opened it slowly. "My name is Mariah Denton, staff writer for the Atlanta Herald. I've been following your journey and the impact of your platform. I would love to conduct a full feature on you, your story, mission, and rise in the tech space. Your voice is important. Please let me know when you're available." Halima blinked at the screen. The Atlanta Herald was one of the city's most respected publications. Their features often launched careers, created investors, and put innovators on statewide radar. She read the email twice, then a third time. Ebony glanced over her shoulder. "What happened?" Halima turned the screen toward her. Ebony screamed so loudly 2 freelancers looked up from their tables. "The Herald? Oh, honey, we are not the same anymore." Ebony placed a hand on her shoulder. "Everything you've said so far has been from the heart, and that's why people trust you." Halima nodded, exhaling deeply. She typed a reply. "Thank you for reaching out, Mariah. I would love to share my story. I'm available for an interview anytime this week." 10 minutes later, Mariah responded with excitement and a list of proposed questions. The journalist wanted to talk about her journey, her challenges, and the children her app would serve. Halima felt her chest warm. After months of pain, her voice finally counted for something. She wasn't just a woman surviving heartbreak. She was a woman shaping something meaningful. Meanwhile, across the city, Frank sat in his office scrolling through his tablet. He was reviewing potential community projects when a headline caught his eye. "Atlanta Innovators Mission Goes Viral. Meet the founder behind the Kings Initiative." He clicked it. At first he skimmed the article, reading about a young mother developing an app for other single mothers. Then he paused at a video embed from the clinic's ad. A toddler's face filled the screen, bright brown eyes, curly hair, the same nose shape he saw every morning in the mirror. His breath left him. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, the room around him shrinking into silence. He replayed the clip, once, twice, a third time. The resemblance wasn't subtle. It was undeniable. He searched the article again, scrolling with trembling hands. Found her, Halima Kings. The world seemed to tilt. He whispered her name under his breath, barely able to breathe. Halima. Memories rushed in, her smile, her warmth, the ultrasound photos he hadn't looked at since she left. He suddenly saw every moment with new clarity. The timing, the breakup, the tears she cried, the way she told him the baby was his, the way he doubted her. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his water glass. His assistant called out from the hallway, but he couldn't speak. He grabbed his keys, bolted from the office, and sat in his car with both hands gripping the steering wheel. The child, their child, his stomach twisted. He had abandoned his own blood. His voice shook as he whispered, "What have I done?" Frank drove straight to his mother's estate in Alpharetta, his heart pounding so hard he felt it in his throat. He barely knocked before pushing the door open. Selina sat in her formal sitting room arranging fresh tulips in a vase. "Frank?" she said, startled. "What brings you here unannounced?" He tossed the tablet onto the table. The paused image of Hakeem stared back at her. "Explain this," he demanded. Selina's hand froze midair. Frank stepped closer. "Why does this child look exactly like me?" Selina's throat moved as she swallowed. "Frank, I don't know who that is. Don't lie to me." His voice broke. "I saw her name. Halima's app is going viral. That's her son." "Our son." Selina's expression tightened. "Frank, calm down." "No," he snapped. "Tell me the truth. The real truth." She exhaled long and shaky. "Fine. Sit down." "I'll stand," he said, jaw clenched. Selina lowered her gaze. "The test wasn't accurate. I had someone adjust it." Frank's breath caught. "You what?" "I was trying to protect you," she insisted. "Halima came from—" "Stop." His voice shook with anger he'd never felt before. "No. No excuses. You lied. You tested my wife without her knowledge. You manipulated the results. You poisoned my marriage." Selina stood, anxious. "I did what any mother would do." "Any mother," he roared. "Any mother would destroy a child's life before they're even born. Any mother would ruin her son's family." Tears welled in her eyes. "Frank, I didn't think you would believe it so easily." He froze. "That was the knife. You didn't think I would believe it so easily," he repeated, each word cutting him open. He turned away, chest heaving, running a trembling hand through his hair. "How long have you known that test was fake?" he asked quietly. Selina whispered, "A few weeks." He spun around again, fury lighting his features. "And you said nothing? I thought you were better off," she whispered. He stared at her, stunned at her cold logic. "Better off?" he repeated. "Without my wife? Without my child? Without the family I wanted?" She opened her mouth to respond, but he was already walking toward the door. As he reached for the handle, he whispered one final sentence. "You didn't just hurt her. You ruined me too." He left without looking back. Selina collapsed into the nearest chair, covering her face with shaking hands. But it was too late. Far, far too late. Frank sat in his car for a long time, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, his shoulders shaking. He had trusted his mother. More than that, he had trusted her over the woman he married. The guilt crawled through him like fire. He replayed every conversation with Halima, every doubt he'd expressed. Every moment he pulled away, every night she slept alone in that guest room, every tear he caused. He sped home, entered his empty condo, and went straight to the guest room. The room was untouched, just as she left it. He sank onto the bed, clutching her old scarf that was still draped across the pillow. He held it to his face and inhaled, hoping to catch even a faint scent of her perfume. The grief that hit him was violent. He couldn't breathe. He whispered into the silence, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He pulled out a box of keepsakes, a drawer he'd never opened since she left. Inside were photos, little notes she had written him, the baby name list they once created, the tiny socks she bought during their first shopping trip. He placed the items on his lap, hands trembling. A man built his life on logic, strategy, and control. Yet here he sat, broken in a way spreadsheets could never quantify. His phone buzzed. It was Selina. He ignored it. Another buzz. Another. He finally answered. "Frank!" Selina cried through the speaker. "Come home. Let's talk. We can fix this." He cut her off. "Mom, the only thing that needs fixing is the relationship I destroyed. And I might be too late," Selina sobbed. "I didn't mean to. But you did." His voice was firm. "And I let you—" He hung up. For the first time since Halima walked out of his life, Frank felt genuine fear, the fear that he might never be forgiven. The fear that the family he could have had was already gone. That night, as Frank sat alone in his living room, memories hit him like waves. He saw Halima dancing barefoot on their balcony during their first summer together. He saw her sitting on the kitchen counter, teasing him about his terrible pancake flips. He saw her falling asleep on his chest during movie nights, her breath soft, her smile peaceful. He remembered the moment she told him she was pregnant, her hands trembling as she held the test, her eyes filled with hope. He had dropped to his knees and kissed her stomach, whispering, "Thank you." He remembered how she held him during one of his toughest business nights, reminding him he wasn't alone. He remembered her joy, her faith, her loyalty. He remembered calling that woman a mistake. His chest tightened painfully. He covered his face with both hands and whispered to the empty room, "I failed you." Tears slipped through his fingers. He wasn't crying because he missed her, he was crying because for the first time he understood the depth of the loss. His mother didn't destroy his life, he did, and now the truth had a voice. It was the face of the son he never got to hold. Frank hadn't slept in 2 days. Since learning the truth, his mind had spiraled in loops of regret, shame, and unbearable longing. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Halima's face, hopeful, then broken. Every time he looked at a screen, he saw their son's face, joyful, then distant. He sent the first message just after dawn. "Frank, Halima, please, I need to talk to you. I know the truth now. I was wrong. Please answer." No response. "Frank, I saw the Herald article. Hakeem is beautiful. He looks just like me. I don't even deserve your attention, but I'm begging. Please." Still nothing. He tried calling, straight to voicemail. He tried emailing her official business address, no reply. He even left a message on her platform's Contact Us page, masked under a professional guise. But silence greeted him at every turn. Meanwhile, Halima sat in her shared workspace, reading his messages and feeling nothing. Not rage, not joy, just a quiet ache where trust used to live. Ebony peeked at her screen. He's persistent. Halima locked her phone and tucked it into her bag. So was the pain. Ebony frowned. "What are you going to do?" Halima shrugged. "Ignore him, just like he ignored the truth when it mattered." Ebony nodded. That part, Frank tried again later that night. "Frank, I went to Mom." She confessed. She did forge the test. "I should have believed you. I let you down. I let our son down. I'm so sorry." Halima read the message from her bedroom, tucked under warm blankets, with Hakeem breathing softly beside her. She whispered to herself, too little, too late. The King's Initiative launch event was held at the Gathering Spot, a sleek, black-owned innovation hub in the heart of Atlanta. Halima wore a custom lavender power suit and her signature head wrap, paired with nude pumps and a calm confidence that turned heads. Mariah Denton stood beside her, grinning as cameras flashed. Dozens of attendees filled the room. Local tech leaders, investors, educators, and single mothers her platform would serve. Ebony handled logistics like a pro, ensuring the step-and-repeat wall stayed organized and the gift bags were passed out. Then Frank appeared at the back of the room. No invitation, no warning, just regret wrapped in a navy blue tailored suit. He stood near the refreshments table, clutching a small envelope. Ebony spotted him first. "Girl." Halima followed her gaze. Their eyes locked across the crowd. Frank began to walk toward her slowly, avoiding attention, but the moment stretched like a slow-motion scene. A couple people noticed, then more. Whispers began to ripple. Halima took a breath and calmly turned her back to him. She walked over to greet the founders of a local moms network, smiling as if her entire past wasn't trying to interrupt her present. Frank waited for a quiet moment and then approached. "Halima," he whispered. She didn't turn. "You need to leave." He lowered his voice. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." She finally turned around, her expression firm. 5 months ago, you had a lifetime, and you gave it up." Attendees nearby glanced over as her voice rose just enough. Frank looked pained. "I didn't know. I was blind." "You chose to be," she said coolly. "My son doesn't need a part-time apology. He needs full-time peace." Frank's shoulders sank. "He's my son. Now he is," she said, tears threatening her calm. "Now?" Security gently approached, from behind. She raised her hand and nodded. Frank stepped back, swallowing hard. He walked out slowly, envelope still in hand, shame dragging behind him. By morning, clips from the event were all over local blogs and Twitter. A trending hashtag appeared, #King's Queen knows her worth. The video showed Frank trying to speak to Halima, her poised dismissal, and him being escorted out without her even flinching. Some users praised her composure. Sis said boundaries and meant it, #King's Queen knows her worth. Others speculated, wait, is that her ex-husband? Is that the CEO from last year's charity gala? And still others dug deeper. Y'all, I think that's the same woman from the scandal involving that fake paternity test. Media outlets caught on fast. The Herald released a follow-up article titled, "From Wife to Warrior, Halima Kings Shows Grace Under Pressure." Bloggers began investigating her past, linking the dots, the gala, the DNA story, and the child. One op-ed went viral. When black women reclaim their voice, the world listens. Halima Kings didn't just build an app, she built a standard, a blueprint for dignity. Frank read every article from his condo, hands shaking, emotions raw. He couldn't sleep, couldn't think, could barely eat. His assistant knocked once during the afternoon and found him staring at a wall. "Sir, we need your input on the charity event." "Cancel it," he muttered. "Sir, just cancel it. I'm not in the mood to pretend I care when I can't even fix my own life." The assistant nodded and slowly backed out. Frank was unraveling. But Halima? She was glowing. A week passed before Halima finally replied to one of Frank's many texts. "Halima, at 2:09 p.m. I'll meet you, but not for closure. I need clarity. I have questions." Frank stared at the message, his hands trembling with a strange mix of hope and dread. They met at a quiet cafe in West Midtown, where the crowd was sparse and the vibe was low-key. Halima arrived in jeans, a blazer, and no makeup. She looked grounded, calm, untouchable. Frank stood when she walked in. "You look—" "Let's not," she cut in, sitting across from him. He nodded, swallowing the compliment. The waitress approached. Halima ordered chamomile tea. Frank just asked for water. A pause. Then she spoke. "Why was it so easy for you to believe your mother over me?" Frank's voice was faint. "Because I thought I owed her everything." Halima nodded slowly. "But I was your wife, carrying your child." He looked away. "I was a coward. You were," she said flatly. He looked up, surprised at her honesty. "But I wasn't perfect either," she added. "I let your mother's words plant seeds of doubt in my own mind. I started questioning my worth. That's on me." Frank leaned in. "You were always worthy. I just didn't see it." She met his eyes. "I don't need you to see it anymore. I see it now." Silence filled the space. Halima placed her palms on the table. "This isn't about apologies. I need to know what kind of man you're becoming. Not for me, but for Hakeem. Because whether or not you're ready to show up, I am." Frank nodded slowly. "I'll prove it, whatever it takes." "Good," she said, standing. "Because I don't need you back. But he needs the truth." She walked out without looking back. Frank sat there in stunned silence. For once, clarity had a sharper edge than closure. 2 days later, Frank attended a private support group for estranged fathers. No cameras, no press, just men sitting in circles admitting their failures out loud. That night he started journaling again. He wrote, "I let ego cost me my entire world. But from this moment forward, it's not about repairing romance. It's about showing my son what a real man looks like." Meanwhile, Halima sat on her balcony, sipping mint tea as Hakeem slept inside. Ebony joined her with a blanket and an old playlist. "You okay?" Halima smiled faintly. "He's trying." Ebony rolled her eyes. "Is that supposed to impress me?" Halima laughed. "It's not about impressing anyone. It's about healing the gap between Hakeem and his father." "That's it." Ebony leaned back. "You still love him?" Halima looked up at the stars. "Love changes, but respect, that's what matters now." Ebony nodded slowly. "That's grown woman talk." "I'm not a girl hoping to be chosen anymore," Halima whispered. "I'm a woman demanding to be respected." Inside, Frank read her old blog entries from when she first started her platform. He smiled sadly at one line. "I don't need to be rescued. I just need to be believed," he whispered into the quiet. "I believe you now." But belief alone wasn't enough anymore. He had a lot to earn. And this time, no shortcuts. Frank Owens didn't just vanish from Halima King's world. He reshaped how he existed in it. He no longer showed up at grand events or posted philanthropic gestures for clout. Instead, he slipped into the shadows of Atlanta's neighborhoods, where single mothers juggled 3 jobs and toddlers ran barefoot through cracked sidewalks. He spent his mornings volunteering at a soup kitchen under a pseudonym, Paul. No cameras, no headlines. Just sweat, humility, and an aching guilt that haunted him every time he saw a child Hakeem's age waiting patiently for food. Frank found a quiet purpose in being useful. It didn't erase what he'd done, but it reminded him of the man he once thought he could be, the man Halima once saw glimpses of when she believed in him. Still, every step he took was for one reason, to earn the right to look Hakeem in the eye someday without shame, and maybe, just maybe, be worthy of Halima's forgiveness. One afternoon, Frank sat in the back of a nonprofit tech panel where Halima's name was mentioned, not as a former flame, but as a visionary. Her app, Rise and Rooted, had sparked a wave across Atlanta's startup scene, connecting single mothers to housing grants, skill-building workshops, and a mentorship pipeline led by women of color. Moved by what she'd built, Frank approached the program quietly, donating anonymously under a shell foundation. But he didn't just fund it. He showed up on build days, pouring cement, installing drywall, fixing porches in neighborhoods that the Owens family's real estate empire once overlooked. Frank wasn't trying to buy redemption. He was trying to live it. Halima had heard whispers. Someone was volunteering under her housing initiative. She thought it was just a retired veteran or a kind soul from the community. But when she saw Frank, kneeling in mud with a nail gun and sweat staining his old button-down, she froze. He didn't ask for anything. No apology requests. No "can we talk?" He just nodded and kept working. For weeks he showed up early and left late, sometimes fixing things others wouldn't notice, a broken bathroom latch, a creaky step, insulation in the nursery. It was like watching a man rebuild not a house but his soul. Halima never spoke to him, but she watched, quietly, closely, and that scared her more than hate ever could. One night, over sweet tea and old R&B records, her best friend Tasha leaned across the kitchen counter. "Girl, I know that look," Tasha said, pointing her spoon like a sword. "You're not just watching him, you're hoping he changed." Halima said nothing, stirring her tea. Tasha didn't stop. "Listen to me. Regret says, I feel bad. Repentance says, I live different. Don't get them twisted." Halima bit her lip. She hated that Tasha was always right. "But he's not the same man," Halima whispered. "And you're not the same woman. Don't shrink back just because he found his shame." Weeks turned into months. Frank didn't press, he didn't chase, he simply remained present. In the community, in the program, sometimes just sitting with Hakeem at the library, story hour from a quiet distance when allowed. Halima saw it all, the gentler tone, the patience with others, the way he carried Hakeem's donated toys in his trunk for the shelter kids. But trust isn't a door you unlock with good deeds. It's a gate guarded by memory. And every time Halima considered letting him back in, her heart flashed back to the DNA test, the night she cried alone in a hospital room. Selena's lies, she could forgive eventually, but she wasn't sure if she'd ever forget. Halima Kings sat in the glass conference room of a midtown Atlanta high-rise, her son Hakeem's crayon drawing still folded in her purse next to her pitch deck. But the women across from her weren't asking her to pitch. They were offering to buy. 7 figures, the woman in the red blazer said, her voice calm but firm. "We've followed Rise and Rooted since your beta phase. You didn't just create a platform, you built a movement. We don't want to change it. We want to scale it." Halima blinked. This wasn't some elevator dream anymore. Her app had gone from handwritten notes in a studio apartment to national syndication, praised by black women tech leaders and single mothers alike. Now, it was being acquired by Newfound Femme Ventures, a firm run by women of color who knew exactly what she'd overcome to get here. Tears welled in her eyes, not because of the money, but because she hadn't needed Frank Owen's name or approval to get here, and soon the whole world would know exactly who that name belonged to. The press release hit the web like a lightning bolt. Rise and Rooted founder Halima Kings closes 7-figure deal with Newfound Femme Ventures, daughter of the late tech pioneer Elijah Kings. Atlanta tech circles gasped. Elijah Kings? As in, Kings Tech? That's when they realized. The woman they had watched build an app for single mothers had quietly been the daughter of one of the earliest black tech architects in Silicon Valley. A genius who died forgotten, his legacy buried under whitewashed corporations that took his patents and gave him little credit. But Halima never flaunted it. She'd chosen to hide the King's name, to protect it, honor it, and build her own reputation without leaning on the shadow of a father the industry never honored in life. Now she stood in the spotlight, not as Frank Owens' ex, but as the rightful heir to a tech legacy the world tried to erase. She looked at Hakeem sleeping that night and whispered, "You come from greatness." Frank Owens had just stepped out of a panel discussion on ethical AI when his phone buzzed, a headline staring back at him. She was never just the maid's daughter. His chest tightened. Reading the article felt like a punch to the gut, not because Halima had kept secrets, but because he'd once looked at her and saw someone beneath him, when she was always light years ahead. She hadn't been broke. She'd been choosing peace over privilege. She'd seen what the tech world did to her father. She saw what wealth had done to people like his mother, Selena. So she created something quietly, purposefully, not with an inheritance, but with intention. Frank sat alone in his car for hours that night. No radio. No calls. He didn't just lose her love. He lost the opportunity to witness her rise, all because he let lies and legacy blind him. Social media didn't hold back. Wait, the man dumped Halima Kings while she was pregnant? You fumbled a literal queen. Make it make sense, Frank Owens. He chose his mommy's lies over a woman who built her own tech empire. Yikes. Within 48 hours, public sympathy pivoted entirely. People reposted photos of Halima's pitch sessions, her app launches, her community work, her baby bump at networking mixers. The comment sections were flooded with support, admiration, and a growing disgust for how she'd been treated. Investors once loyal to the Owens brand now invited Halima to keynote panels. Celebrities posted about Rise and Rooted. Even journalists started questioning Selena Owens' role in the scandal, and quietly, behind the walls of his empty luxury condo, Frank watched it all unfold. Not out of jealousy, not even regret, but because for the first time the world was finally seeing her the way he should have. It was surreal, walking through her office tower as a boss, not an assistant. Halima's name was on the lease. Her company plaque was on the glass. The employees, all driven by a mission bigger than money, led by a woman who once cried alone in a hospital room. Now, she signed deals in six figures and reviewed pitches from former colleagues who once overlooked her. Frank stopped by one day, unannounced, not with roses or apologies. Just a small toy for Hakeem and a note that read, "I see you now, fully." She didn't invite him in, not yet, because the truth was, the balance had shifted. She no longer had to fight for space in his world. He was now hoping for a seat in hers. 3-year-old Hakeem was curious by nature. He had Halima's eyes and her unrelenting curiosity, and lately, that curiosity took the shape of a single word. "Mommy, who's my daddy?" Halima froze in the middle of folding his little Spider-Man hoodie. She had expected this day, practiced speeches in her head, rehearsed answers that wouldn't paint Frank as a villain, but wouldn't glorify him either. But none of it prepared her for the soft innocence of that question. "Your daddy," she said gently, crouching to meet his wide eyes, "is someone who made a lot of mistakes, but he loves you very much." Hakeem looked confused. "Why don't I see him?" That night Halima sat on her couch long after Hakeem had fallen asleep, scrolling past Frank's texts, stopping on one. "I know I failed you, Halima, but please, let me at least be a father." Her fingers hovered over the reply button. She didn't owe Frank anything, not after what he did. But maybe Hakeem did deserve an answer, a chance. A small door opened. Halima set clear boundaries, every other Saturday, supervised, no promises, just presence. Frank didn't argue. He showed up at the small community center where Halima volunteered. The first time he saw Hakeem face to face, he forgot how to breathe. The little boy looked just like her, but something in the eyes, the way he tilted his head, the smirk, it was him too. The resemblance was undeniable. Hakeem clung to Halima's legs at first, hiding behind her like she was a shield, but Frank came prepared, not with toys, but with a sketchbook and crayons. "Do you want to draw a superhero with me?" Frank asked softly. Hakeem peeked out. "Only if he can fly." Frank smiled. "Then we'll give him wings." Each visit was small, awkward, but consistent. Frank didn't miss one. He didn't overstep. He didn't talk about the past. He just showed up. Halima watched from a distance, never letting her guard down, but noticing that Hakeem began to smile a little more whenever Frank walked in. It wasn't fast. Frank didn't buy affection. He didn't bribe Hakeem with gifts. He didn't rush. Instead, he learned how to tie toddler shoes, how to sit cross-legged on a playmat, how to read bedtime stories even when the kid wanted the same book 10 times. One afternoon, Hakeem asked Frank, "Why weren't you here when I was a baby?" Frank looked at Halima, then back at Hakeem. "Because I didn't know how to be brave then. But I'm learning now." It wasn't perfect. Frank stumbled. Hakeem sometimes had outbursts. Halima sometimes doubted. But when Hakeem ran to Frank with his arms out yelling, "Daddy," for the first time, Halima saw something shift in Frank. Not pride, not ego, just pure, humbled gratitude. Gone was the man who quoted spreadsheets more than scripture, who once chose his mother's word over hers. This Frank sat on colorful carpets, got paint on his shirt, let Hakeem smear peanut butter on his chin. One evening, Hakeem fell asleep in Frank's lap during a movie night. Halima had intended to take him and leave, but Frank was whispering lullabies under his breath, something Halima's late father used to hum. She stood at the door, silent, watching. "Where did this version of you come from?" she finally asked. Frank looked up, voice low. "From the day I lost you." Silence stretched between them. She wasn't ready to forgive. But she couldn't deny what she saw. A man trying not for show, but for his son. Halima lay awake that night, the city lights pouring through her window like ghosts of choices past. Her heart was tired, not bitter, but protective. She loved the way Hakeem laughed with Frank. She saw the healing. But every time Frank touched Hakeem's curls or whispered "champ," she felt something stir, a love she thought had died, flickering again. But love wasn't the same as trust, and trust, once broken, required more than presence. It required proof. Could she ever risk her peace again, the empire she built, the balance she fought for a man who had shattered it once? She looked at a photo of her and Hakeem on her nightstand, then at the one Hakeem had drawn, their family in crayon, Mommy, Daddy, Hakeem, and a house with a big heart over it. Her fingers trembled. The child had made his choice, but Halima's? That was still undecided. The email had come on a quiet Wednesday night. Dear Miss Kings, you've been selected as the keynote speaker for this year's Black Women in Tech Summit. Your story, your vision, and your rise have inspired a generation. Halima reread the words 3 times, hands trembling. She'd gone from being the girl dumped while pregnant to the woman being asked to lead one of the biggest stages in tech. The event was set in Atlanta's Midtown Convention Hall, a sleek glass venue overlooking the city skyline. The night she landed in Atlanta with Hakeem's tiny hand in hers, she'd only had $300, a suitcase, and a resume that said nothing about her legacy. Now, billboards bore her face. Frank's mother, Selena, once called her unremarkable. Now the industry called her game-changing. And the night before her keynote, Halima sat alone on her hotel balcony, watching the city lights below, a queen walking through a palace built by her own calloused hands. She didn't invite him. She hadn't told him. Yet when she stepped onto that grand stage in a fitted white suit, hair wrapped in a regal gold scarf, her voice calm and commanding, Halima saw him in the crowd. Frank, seated in the back, no press badge, no official ticket, but eyes locked on her as if nothing else in the room mattered. He clapped the loudest, smiled the proudest. Halima didn't skip a beat. She spoke of innovation, resilience, generational wealth, and walking into rooms people said she'd never enter. She didn't mention his name, didn't need to. Her triumph was its own testimony. When it was over, the room erupted. Standing ovation, people in tears, flashbulbs going off. Frank didn't try to rush her. He stood quietly, hands in his pockets, waiting, as if praying she'd see him differently now, and as she exited the side stage, their eyes met. No hate, just history, and maybe something still unfinished. Backstage, Halima didn't dodge him. She nodded once, motioning toward the hallway. A silent agreement. They walked without speaking, her heels clicking against the marble, his steps slow, measured. Finally, alone in a small green room, the air heavy with unsaid words, Halima leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. You came? Frank nodded. I didn't want to take the spotlight. I just needed to see you shine. She tilted her head. Why? Guilt? No, he said. Because I missed watching you become the woman I always knew you were. Halima scoffed. But you didn't stand by her when she needed you most. Frank lowered his head. I let fear win. I let my mother's lies cloud everything. I was weak. She swallowed. And now? I've spent every day since trying to earn something I might never deserve. Your peace. Silence. You broke me, Frank, and then I rebuilt myself with the same hands you let go of. He nodded slowly. I see that now. Frank stepped closer but kept his distance. I watched Hakeem sleep last weekend, and I realized something. She didn't speak. I never stopped loving you, even when I tried to move on, even when I lied to myself. I loved you through my cowardice, through my silence, through my shame. Halima blinked hard. Her throat tightened. He stepped closer. But love that causes pain isn't enough. I get that now. She felt tears welling. Then why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to know. Not to win you back, not to rewrite the past, but because truth deserves breath. He gently reached out, then stopped himself. You don't have to forgive me, but I had to say it. She turned away, hiding the shimmer in her eyes. I never stopped loving you either, she whispered. But I did stop needing you to love me to feel whole. Halima turned back to face him, eyes sharp now, stronger. Frank, I've changed. I'm not the same woman you left behind. I'm not your second chance at a fantasy. I'm a mother, a CEO, a daughter of legacy. I don't want a rescue story. Frank nodded, swallowing hard. I don't want to rewrite your story. I want to be part of the chapter you choose, if you choose. She stepped closer, voice calm. Then love me for who I became without you. Don't fall for the memory. Respect the woman who rose from the ashes. He smiled, a sad but proud smile. I already do. As they stood in that quiet space, not lovers, not enemies, but people learning how to carry the past without breaking the present, Halima realized something. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about reclaiming power, not for him but for herself, and that she had done. Sunday afternoons in the king's household now came with a new rhythm. Halima sat on the living room rug, watching Hakeem stack his colorful alphabet blocks while Frank knelt beside him, carefully helping spell out Mom and Dad. It wasn't picture perfect, but it was peaceful. They had learned to co-parent without tension, a harmony built on respect and understanding, not romance. Frank no longer tried to win her back with apologies. Instead, he showed up for swim class, he packed lunch for daycare, he helped with doctor visits and sat quietly at parent-teacher meetings. Selena Owens, once venomous, now stayed out of the way. After Halima's public revelation about her late father's legacy, the media firestorm had softened Selena's sharp edges. Frank's mother had even sent a handwritten letter of apology. Not that Halima needed it, but she tucked it into Hakeem's baby book anyway. They weren't a couple. But they were a team, for Hakeem. Still, at night, when Hakeem was asleep and the house fell silent, Halima often sat at her desk staring at the family calendar and wondering, was this enough? Or was there still something quietly waiting between them? It was a breezy Saturday at Piedmont Park, the same place Halima had once brought Hakeem on her very first weekend alone in Atlanta. She hadn't known Frank was planning anything. He'd simply asked if they could spend time together as a family. No pressure. They walked under the changing leaves, Hakeem running ahead with his tiny scooter, shrieking with laughter. Frank carried a juice pouch in one hand, wipes in the other, the image of a devoted father who'd traded his tailored suits for soft cotton tees and sneakers. As Hakeem settled on a nearby blanket with snacks, Frank motioned Halima toward a worn wooden bench beneath a white oak tree. She sat, cautious. Frank didn't kneel. He didn't pull out a ring. Instead, he pulled a small paper crane from his pocket, one Hakeem had folded earlier in the week. Inside was a tiny note, written in Hakeem's wobbly handwriting. Can we be a family for real? Frank looked at her, eyes unshaking. I'm not asking for forever today. I'm asking for maybe. Halima blinked, overwhelmed. I love you, he said softly, but this time I'll walk at your pace. The air between them was still. No gasps, no music swelling, just silence. Halima turned the paper crane in her hand, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what she could say next. Yes would be easy, no would be final. But life, real life, wasn't always made of absolutes. She looked at Frank, the man who had once walked away from her pregnant and confused. Now sitting beside her in worn jeans, patience in his posture, not pressure. Maybe, she whispered. Let's take our time, Frank exhaled, not in disappointment, but in gratitude. Maybe is enough, he replied. Maybe means I still get to show up. They stood as Hakeem ran toward them, arms open wide. Frank lifted him with ease, and together they walked back to the blanket. No engagement photos, no fairy tale declarations, just slow trust, just the choice to try, again, on her terms. And that was more romantic than any diamond. 2 weeks later, the city buzzed as the grand doors of King's Tech HQ opened for a special press event, the unveiling of Halima King's latest product, a tech-powered childcare platform designed to help single parents manage schedules, finances, and health with ease. Reporters lined up, cameras flashed, and through the glass doors came the scene that would grace headlines the next day. Halima, in a cream power suit, heels clicking, leading the way. Beside her, Frank in casual slacks and a neutral polo, carrying Hakeem's diaper bag with one hand and their son's favorite stuffed elephant in the other. And between them, little Hakeem, holding both their hands, giggling. A woman behind the lens whispered, she runs the company now, and the man who once left her, he's carrying the diaper bag. But Halima didn't walk with vengeance, she walked with vision. Because power wasn't about payback, it was about presence. And as the sliding doors closed behind them, sealing their family within a future Halima had built from broken pieces, one thing was clear. This was love, not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that survives, the kind that grows, on new terms.